So today I want to share some experiences with early career collaboration with colleagues Sindura Kularajan in the USU Math and Stats department, as well as Jessica Benally from University of California, Berkeley. And before I talk about this collaboration, I want to center this collaboration within the support network that made it possible. And so that support network is through NSF grant, community impact with teacher leaders in data science and math modeling. Some of the team here, we have Brenda Kohler, Brennan Bean, Ty Campbell, Sindura, Carrie Bala, Eric Rowley, and Don Busenbark. Don's in Roosevelt campus, and Eric goes between Blanding and Logan. And so this team is really what led to this opportunity as an early career scholar. So, for example, the networks that Eric Rowley and Don Busenbark have with the local communities and Roosevelt campuses and the Blanding campuses, as well as their guidance, have made this possible. And something that they do every year are biannual professional development events in rural Utah. And these are the events that we came in and had an opportunity as early career to collaborate within. And so something that motivated our collaborations is this call of action that's occurring in the education community and as well as the math education community more focused. And that's to make gestures towards the socio-ecological practices in mathematics education. This is done by ICNE, the International Congress of Mathematics Instruction. And the idea here is to realize that our classrooms are complex adaptive systems in which people and nature are one. They're not separable, and we need to start thinking more about how to inhabit intersections of social constructs like language and culture with human constructs like our bodies or ecologies or space, and even how do we integrate this with mathematics? How do we realize that these things and mathematics are one? Or maybe insert any STEM discipline or any field that you're interested in. How do we view our classrooms as these complex systems? And so our gesture in this collaboration was to develop professional development activities for the USU STEAM EXPOs in Blanding. And this synergized our research areas. So, for example, Jessica Benally's research area is in ethnomathematics. My research area is in embodied cognition. And my colleague Sindura's research area is in math modeling. And these are all considered under socio-ecological frameworks. So these align with socio-ecological, under the socio-ecological frame. And so we realized, hey, each of our research programs aligns with this. How do we synergize our research areas and expertise to develop professional development activities? And so Jessica, drawing from ethnomathematics and indigenous education principles, taught us that there's a sacred view of nature that permeates the foundational processes of teaching and learning within the indigenous communities. Indigenous education also recognizes language as a sacred expression of breath. It uses story to root perspectives, and we learn through our bodies and spirits as much as we do our minds. In addition, we're connected assemblages, this idea that we're all one, we're a moving unit, we're learning and growing together. And there's also this, we also learn that there's sort of this divide and conflict between this Western emphasis on credentials and status, so what we're using knowledge to gain these credentials, versus are we using this knowledge learned at the university to serve our community. And the indigenous communities are more concerned with how are you serving the community with your knowledge. And so also trying to think of, okay, how do we develop activities that are going to go back into the community and make some impact? And then embodied cognition, Jessica also uses embodied cognition, but this is also my research area. And so what embodied cognition is about is really that when I think about language, where language comes from, where semantics or meaning comes from, it's very much rooted in our sensory motor systems of interacting with the world around us, moving. And there's this idea that if I want to, for example, mathematics is often dissociated from the student or the learner. It's seen as separate, a formal thing that you obtain, or you at some point will attain. Whereas this idea or approach that I study within embodied cognition called new materialism really says that a mathematical concept is always fluid and in some important sense unfinished. So collectively as assemblages, we're the ones that create the mathematics. The mathematics lives within us. It is not dissociated from us. So just to give you a feel for embodied cognition more and language, so this idea of where do certain types of language like metaphors come from. So this is very common in mathematics. When you're listening to experts present mathematics, they often will talk in informal language or metaphors. And so when you unpack that language, what you find is, again, it's rooted in our sensory motor systems. So for example, numbers is a mathematical concept that is linked to this idea of locations on a path or some sort of body movement, a movement. Arithmetic operations like addition could be like traveling along the path. So to make sense of mathematical concepts, we relate that to our sensory world. And here's a fun one I like to implement sometimes in a calculus classroom. So here we have a constant function, and sometimes when we teach derivatives, we're really asking, imagine this is the time and this is the distance. We really want to know, okay, what is the rate? Or if I give you this function, can you graph the derivative? And really, what I also ask students, how would you move like the derivative? And so sometimes students, they want to follow this line and go like this. And I say, hold on. What is the slope of the line? Oh, 0. Okay, so what should you be doing? This. And so there's some sort of like co-construction of meaning through our sensory motor systems. Math modeling is my colleague Sindura's area. And the idea of math modeling is to take a real-world situation, model it using mathematics to make predictions and solve problems. So one key aspect of this mathematical modeling cycle is to make assumptions and define essential variables, and then iterate as needed to refine and extend a model, verify your model, and report results. And so using our combined expertise, we developed the PD activities, but we also asked the following questions. How can professional development workshops for mathematics education be reimagined through a networking of socio-ecological frameworks? Our frameworks are, again, embodied cognition, mathematical modeling, and ethnomathematics in ways that promotes epistemic pluralism, or multiple ways of knowing. We also wanted to understand how educators felt about these activities and their feedback in implementing them into their classrooms. So again, we're drawing from these intersections. We're also paying attention to local context. Specifically, Blanding is where these activities were carried out. You notice here the Navajo Nation is right there. So that would be our local context. Our participants are the following. We had 12 USU Math and Stats faculty from Logan, Blanding, Eastern, and Uinta Basin campuses, 1 biology faculty, 1 USU advisor, and 13 students came along. We also had 34 in-service participating teachers from across rural areas. In addition, before I get to our math activities, we did community building excursions as well. So here we are all at Monument Valley sharing this amazing experience. We have Don Mose Jr., who's telling us, he's Navajo Dene, he's telling us here about the formations in this amphitheater. He told us all to lay down in this amphitheater rock formation. Here we are here, and we all go back and lay down, and he says, look up, what do you see? And here's the picture. So I'll just pause for a moment. What do you see there?
It's a beautiful little arch and wind. It's beautiful. And I see like the other hole looks like a sun.
Yeah.
And through the clouds.
Yeah. So so with ethnomathematics and their culture, nature is always linked, and nature is everywhere. And so this is like the eagle. They're seeing like a beak, and then here's like the and here's like a native elder in the hair. But then if you look up from this angle, it's like an eagle and a beak. And his sons played music for us. We got to do the dance around the fire, and they played music, and all of the participants chained arms, and we went and danced. All right, so the workshops, I'm going to explain on a 2-day session of activities, and I'm not going to go through all of them. I'm just going to show you some examples. Concepts that were embedded were things in school algebra to abstract algebra, but we didn't tell participants exactly what mathematics was in there because we wanted them to create it. We didn't want to influence anything or have them follow some preconceived mathematical script. And so after we designing these lessons, our early career team, Sindura and Jessica and me, we came together and we started to abstract what we were really doing as we were combining our areas. And this is the structure of the lessons that we began to follow. So first, plant shared experiences. We're going to center in cultural and local context, and we're going to connect with one another. Second, we're going to create some sort of embodied environment where students are playing as assemblages to create the mathematics. Next, we're going to encourage personal language development, like metaphors. And then we're going to move towards co-construct definitions, proofs, models, maybe if this is for teachers, lesson products. So some sort of product at the end. And so one of the activities we did was a trail trek activity of the Nations of the Four Corners Trails in Blanding. So we went and we ate lunch here all together, and then we walked around, and here's a map, and we all took a hike. And the task first, I want to talk about that first stage of our lesson structure, which is planting shared experiences, culturally centering oneself, and connecting. And so they were told to collect data on their hike using their bodies, using their environment or physical cues. And the task was, imagine that a hiker with only 75 minutes to experience the monuments of the Four Corners region asks you advice on the ultimate hiking route that captures the essence of the Four Corners. You are asked with designing the most optimal hiking route. Clearly state any simplifying assumptions and justifications. It was up to them to determine what optimal meant for them. And so here you can see, here's a notebook of some data that was collected. There was a lot of we took this many steps, we turned this many degrees, and so on. Here, participants are working on creating their optimal paths. And as you see, what's meaningful to them is they value seeing dwelling sites. They value short paths with minimal elevation changes. They value landscape views over sites, some of them. They want the shortest possible path. So one participant stated that the most important path was where she could see a certain species of birds. So here's another task we did. This is a lunar calendar activity, and I want to go into these 4 phases more fully of how we structured the activity. So again, first, we are planting shared experiences, and we're centering and connecting. So to do that, we all went into a Hogan. We heard elders speak. So the people and the participants had already had that experience. We listened to an elder talk about the lunar calendar and the moon cycles and their seasons. And then we moved forward to an embodied activity. I guess before the embodied play, we were connecting. And so we asked things like, what is your favorite season and traditions? What aspects of the Navajo calendar or lunar calendar do you connect with? And so participants got quite a bit of time to discuss those things and connect. And then when we got to the embodied play part of the lesson, we were really interested in this idea of cycles in nature. So cycles are everywhere in nature. They're here in the moon calendar system. And if you look at this, you see a new moon roughly every 28 days. So every 28 days you return back to a new moon. And so we started situating questions or prompts within this context of a lunar calendar. And so one of the prompts was, you look up and see a new moon, which marks the first day of a new month. What should your observation schedule be? Maybe you record the moons every 2 days, 3 days, or so on, before you see the next new moon, so that you don't miss the next new moon. And then a second prompt was something like, suppose there are 28 days in a moon cycle, what observation schedule should you choose to experience every moon? So from new, moon, waning, and full. And so these questions may not look like mathematical questions at first, but the concepts in play are division, remainders, relatively prime, and all the way up to a high ceiling advanced undergraduate course of abstract algebra involving something called generators of cyclic groups. And so as they were playing with these questions, they co-constructed mathematics together. And here are some examples. So they may say, they observe that the observation day choice that brings you back to the next new moon are the divisors of 28. So there's division. And then they also came and hit on conjectures. Like if your observation schedule is every D days and D and 28 don't have any common divisors, then you'll hit all of the outer shells, or you'll hit all of the moons. And that language is very much personal, situated in that cultural context. And here's what the formal mathematics looks like. So when I just said that conjecture, in the textbooks that students get and read, this is what that conjecture looks like. And and this is typically where classroom instruction starts.
Oh, it makes sense.
But we want to reverse that.
Yeah.
These symbols and this language is dissociated from the student,
right,
and very foreign to them. Rather, we want to develop the language in a context that's familiar to them, that they're playing with, that they're developing and constructing meaning in, and then as instructor, eventually I'll help them formulate their language into something more formal. Like this, and then we'll prove their conjectures. We'll work on trying to prove it. But this is certainly not where the learning should start. So that was kind of when we met as early career colleagues, we were like, this is the problem. It's too formal, it's dissociated from the student. How can we use our areas to change that? And let's see. So here's a final activity we did. We recently, this is actually something we did at the Noise Summit in July at Washington, D.C., at an orientation in Roosevelt just a couple weeks ago, and also in Blanding. And again, this followed our same structure. So the activity was to play the Navajo stick game. And so following that structure, that first step was centering in a cultural or local context and connecting. And so here's some of the prompts that we had for that centering part. So if you want to go ahead and discuss among each other. What are some of your local contexts? What are some favorite games you like to play?
Emotional ones. But you know, sitting here and looking at us, because a lot of my research is in breakdancing, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, there's a whole missed opportunity here. I wish I learned math like this. I think students need to know math is everywhere and everything you do all day, every day.
Yeah.
I've never seen anyone use these kind of activities the way you all are doing, and if I would have learned math, I'm just giving you compliments right now. If I would have learned math like that, I probably would have really been in love with math.
Yeah.
And now I'm going to give you my info later because I just want to come to all your presentations.
Yeah, we would love for you guys to join, and we also love collaboration. So from if other departments are doing other cool things and getting together, that'd be amazing.
Sorry if I'm going into Q&A.
No, it's like,
What prompted you to reach out to indigenous communities and kind of look at their games and their spaces? Because Blanding the location, or was there?
mostly because of the local context. We knew that the were teachers in rural areas, and we also wanted to learn from them. Blanding was one of the sites. Uinta is another one. But looking at Blanding, yeah, it's because the population there is Navajo, and many of the teachers there, their students are Navajo as well. And so it's important for us to draw from their local resources. And one of those local resources, was this Navajo stick game, and that Don Mose Jr., the Navajo elder I pointed out in the beginning with that excursion at Monument Valley, he actually wrote this book. And the materials for the stick game are coming from the San Juan School District's curriculum. And so we're really trying to start with the local context. So typically, sometimes when we design lessons or PD, we start with insert whatever subject you teach the content. And then we try to build the activity based on the content sometimes. But here we really were thinking, let's start with the local context first and ask ourselves, what is the mathematics we see in it, and how can we learn the mathematics through the local context so that it's authentic. Yeah, so that it's authentic to them. And so engaging in embodied play, so time to play, 30 minutes. So we introduced this story, we read it aloud together, we gave them instructions on how to play the stick game. They familiarized themselves with the stick game and then began to play it. And we encouraged any personable or situated mathematical language during this time, so we would ask things like, what mathematics do you see in the game? Many of them saw probability. And then we tried to move them towards this last step of refined co-constructed mathematics lessons or some sort of product. For them, the meaningful product was a lesson product because these were teachers. Yes. And so this is their brainstorming work on a probability lesson. And in the Navajo stick game, you have 40 beads and 10, 10, 10, 10. There's a river, 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 river. And usually these beads are on a table. I think I had a picture there. Let me see if I can exit out.
I saw that where we did the conference thing. Was that?
Yeah. So this is what the board looks like. And so you use sticks as pieces to jump the rocks. And they started brainstorming, and they're like, well, maybe, there was this issue of time. How do we introduce the game, the story, and then go into the math? That's a lot of time. And one of their ideas was maybe we can see if in PE they can play the game. And instead of using the pebbles and the sticks, maybe we use the students as the sticks, and they get to jump and move themselves. So those are kind of the conversations we were having, and some of their objectives, like they wanted to be able to have students display data in terms of frequency tables or tree diagrams, etc. So we encouraged that. They eventually created co-constructed lesson drafts of products that they could continue to work on. And we also collected some workshop feedback. And I'll just summarize this because we're kind of running out of time. Well, I'll read off a few, I guess. So one of the survey questions was, in your opinion, what made or added value, what is the added value of constructing mathematics compared to working with ready-made models? We could try and fail and discover what would and wouldn't work. They're fun to see the progress, though in practical implementation, one must consider time constraints, costs, and most importantly, time management. It's super important, the use of imagination. And then this was the hard question we asked. In your opinion, is the activity presented in this workshop challenging what we call doing and learning mathematics? In what way? So does this look like what learning mathematics should be? And they said both professional development courses were both interesting. It was not what I would think of as learning math. Our experiences were messy without specific outcomes defined. The thinking was open to creativity. So we value creativity. It's not really what I think is doing that. It was a different way to present math learning as a teacher, but as a teacher, I'm not judged by how well my students learn the math. I'm judged by how well they can show their proficiency on a test. So this switch in learning comes with trepidation. I can also get in trouble by deviating from the district prescribed curriculum, so this method challenged a lot of practical math teaching learning that I do. Again, and then not giving specific lesson objectives, formal vocabulary, or expected outcomes. It's difficult because these are the things we are evaluated as being less effective. So we sort of see this conflict between, what the education researchers are saying that we value creativity, they value creativity, we value local context, we value the social, the ecological, but then there's this conflict between the system and the standards.
It just blows my mind when they say, as a teacher, I'm not judged by how well students learn.
K through 12.
So there's some issues with this sort of implementation and system conflict, I think.
You gotta balance your priorities.
Yeah.
But although we need to balance this.
Well, but then also, you mentioned time constraints. At the same time, I think I'm in much the same boat where if I had different mathematics instruction, and I have in a certain, I would have really felt confident and loved it. And so, how is the time spent in helping someone learn it?
Mm-hmm. As long as they can align it and run objectives at the same time. But this is beautiful.
Thanks, yeah. So these were just some discussion and future questions. Since it's just us, I guess we have 10 more minutes, right? Till 4:30. If we want to just discuss questions, we can discuss these or anything you guys want.
You have no idea. Okay. What have you learned from the Navajo about how they teach math within the culture? Is that...
It's something I'm still learning for sure.
That would make me... This is just...
So this is where we leaned on our colleague Jessica Benally.
Okay.
So she's Dene Navajo, and so she helped us a lot with kind of understanding the right ways to present. For example, instead of teaching their culture as a white person, maybe having an elder who's willing to come and talk and teach to the kids, and so oftentimes when we're presenting the cultural components, either there's an elder or we have a video of an elder that presents that, and as presenters or researchers, we take a backseat and step down. And so I'm still learning. And I think it helps that these rural areas, that the communities are not that far from us. And for example, when we were in Uinta, and I think I'm learning by interacting and going to these sites, really, and doing these PD events. So the last event we did was in Uinta. Megan is there. She's a member of the Ute tribe. And she took us on a tour of the reservation. And she kind of showed us all the sites and everything. And so there's a picture here of this mural. And so this mural, right after she showed us, so this is at Uinta River High School, she took us to on the reservation, and the high school is just covered with these murals. And so I think it's really just the more you go to the sites, you learn. You get inspired by it and you learn about it, yeah.
Tell me about, unless you have a card, because I'm just fascinated right now. Embodied, what is your specialty? How does this, I need to go more. I'm just going to go to everything you, because how does that, what is your specialty, your research area? So I hear you talking about movement.
Yeah, so my research area, so I guess I started off looking at how do we develop mathematical language? Where does the meaning for the language come from? I also was starting off looking at how do we develop intuition. And then as I researched that more, I kind of realized, okay, a lot of this idea of constructing meaning, trying to build intuition, I think it really boils down to the sensory motor system. Yeah. And so embodiment is really about using body-based resources, motion, movement, interactions. Sometimes in the classroom, interactions could be in small group, but they could also be multi-party embodied activities where everybody is up in the room working on things. So for example, that calendar activity, where there was that heavy-duty theorem in the book, you could have everybody just circle up, okay, and so maybe there's like 5 of us, or let me pick a better number, maybe there's 6 of us, and I ask, okay, you're gonna pass, you're going to have like a standard pass, so maybe 2 jumps, you pass every 2, or you pass every 3. What should your pass size be so that you hit all of your classmates? And so they can start, and they eventually will start to figure out, they test, they realize, okay, 1 works. Yeah. They realize, what did I say, 6 people? Yeah. They realize 1 works. They realize 2 doesn't work because 2 and 6. They realize 3 doesn't work. They realize 4 doesn't work, but then they realize 5 works. And then they realize 6 doesn't work. So they realize 1 and 5 work. And then maybe a couple other students will come in and they'll do some more example cases. And eventually they'll develop a conjecture, like, oh, it works if the jump size is relatively prime to the number of students we have. And so the language is really rooted in the students playing their embodiment, their motion,